Okay, welcome to the second section. Now we've just discussed and I've introduced to you a presentation in relation to the principles of training. We're now going to focus on the methods of training. So what are the different types of methods that will support a performer in developing specific aspects of their fitness? And the way that we break this down is by looking at which method of training develops somebody's aerobic fitness, the ones that we see on the left hand side here, which incorporate mainly continuous methods of training, swimming for long periods of time, jogging, cycling, and indeed running over long periods of time. And notice at the top here we've got O2. That means predominantly using oxygen. Then on the far right hand side over there, we look at anaerobic, and remember, anaerobic means that we train without the use of oxygen because the level of intensity is so high, the demand for energy cannot be supplied in the form of oxygen because it's quick explosive movements, and it means your heart rate is getting up to and beyond 160 beats per minute, so you're working your anaerobic threshold. Those type of activities will include plyometrics, which are explosive activities, and interval training, such as short, sharp sprints and bursts of energy with a recovery time in between. We then have these in the middle, which develop both, dependent upon how they're designed. So circuit training, for example, could work the performer anaerobically if it was done for short bursts of explosive energy between 30 seconds and a minute, on a station with a rest period and an interval in between. However, you may be able to train aerobically, so you're exercising at each station for 2 or more minutes, therefore requiring oxygen as the main supply of energy. We then have weight training, again that can be used in a similar method, so you could work aerobically by working for long periods of time and developing muscular endurance within a muscle, or you might do explosive bursts of energy like powerful squats or deadlifts, which work anaerobically. And then the final one is fartlek, a Swedish term for speed play, very similar to the types of fitness level requirements required for all games players. And that means that you're varying the pace, you're moving from a jog to a sprint to a walk at different intervals up to and beyond 30 to 45 minutes. And that again, because of the jogging element, will develop the aerobic fitness. However, those bursts of sprint, that will work the heart to a higher level of intensity and work the heart beyond 160 beats per minute, and therefore your anaerobic development. If you have a look at the next slide, I've tried to explain by looking at how your pulse rate indicates the type of exercise that you're doing. So for example, from this first one here, we see that the performer does not get within the anaerobic stage of exercises and they are working aerobically up to a certain point, and notice the time scale that they're working at, and there's a sudden increase in heart rate closer to the end. So this, for example, may be the type of exercise required for a marathon runner with a sprint finish at the end. And therefore the method of training that is relevant to the performer here is continuous training. So working at an aerobic level with your heart rate just under that 140 or 150 beats per minute requirement. The second one here, notice the very sharp increase in heart rate, and notice the small amount of time that it occurs. So this will relate to somebody probably doing interval training, somebody that's probably doing 100-meter repetitions with an equivalent period of rest in between. So it's a sprint followed by a walk back, and the heart rate will reduce and go back down, similar to resting. So we can see that they are working within a high level of intensity, and so this method of training would relate to interval training. Our third one here, notice how the heart rate fluctuates, and notice how it varies from between the aerobic zone of exercise to the anaerobic zone of exercise. So here, typically, the method of exercise that you would seen being prevalent here would be fartlek training. So it works both systems, anaerobic and aerobic. We then look at this exercise, so from rest we see a gradual increase. Notice for longer periods of time that we've got periods of rest for. So this is typically a circuit training session which lasts for up to around about half an hour with around about 8 to 10 stations. So you've got high levels of intensity with periods of recovery. So there we're working pretty much within the anaerobic threshold. Here, the next one, notice the heart rate doesn't really increase. And as we are aware, flexibility training now is used by a lot of our performers as part of their recovery and also to increase the range of movement. But in order to carry out different methods of flexibility, static stretching, ballistic stretching, it doesn't require high levels of intensity, so their heart rate will stay pretty low. And the final method here, notice a massive sharp rise, an increase in heart rate. It's done for a very small period of time. This method of training relates to plyometrics because you're working high levels of intensity. You're trying to develop those fast white glycotic fibers which increase and develop leg power. So I've used these tables as a way for you to understand why these methods of training support athletes, and they specifically work the performer dependent upon the energy requirements that they have. So referring back to the principles of training, working with specificity. I hope that helps.